Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're doing a deep dive today into the world of fictional female detectives.
Ooh, fun.
It all started with this book review of Murder Mile by Lynda Plante.
Okay.
The review itself wasn't exactly glowing. It called it a generic story of police investigation.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah, but it got me thinking about how female detectives in books and movies, they often seem to fit certain patterns. Like they're these tropes. Have you noticed that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the reviewer actually spends a lot of time dissecting those tropes. More than the book itself, almost.
Really?
Yeah, they outline two main types of female detectives that we see all the time.
Okay, I'm ready. Lay on me.
Okay, so first we have the tough cop archetype.
Oh, yeah.
Battling addiction, haunted by past trauma, pushing everyone away. The classic flawed hero. The one we usually see with, like, male characters.
Right. Like a grizzled, seen-it-all detective who's, a little bit broken but still gets the job done.
Exactly.
It's interesting, though, how that same tough exterior gets used for female characters, too.
Yeah, for sure.
Is it because we expect men to be these, like, stoic protectors, even if they're flawed? And then by giving women those same traits, it's almost like blurring the lines a bit,
Yeah.
with traditional gender roles.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It could be the author trying to kind of flip those expectations around a bit.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's just unconsciously reflecting those patterns that are already out there.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what's the other type?
The other common one, the reviewer calls it the underconfident but brilliant detective.
Okay.
She's navigating a male-dominated world, quietly proving her worth, always underestimated.
Ah, yes, the unassuming genius who uses being overlooked to her advantage.
Exactly. It's like her secret weapon.
People dismiss her, and that lets her observe and then ultimately outsmart everyone.
It's a classic.
But why is this trope so common? Why do we see it over and over again?
Well, the reviewer argues that it kind of reflects real-life pressures on women. They're often expected to downplay their intelligence or ambition, especially in fields that are dominated by men. So maybe this trope is a way of exploring how women navigate those expectations, like turning that perceived weakness into a strength.
That's really fascinating. It's like fiction holding up a mirror to reality in a way,
Right.
showing us how women can succeed by sort of playing the game.
Playing to those expectations.
It makes you wonder how much of this is like a conscious choice by authors, or are they just subconsciously reflecting those patterns without even realizing it?
Yeah, that's the big question. It's probably a bit of both, to be honest.
Yeah.
But it's definitely worth thinking about how these tropes, even if they're unintentional, can either reinforce those gender stereotypes or maybe even challenge them a little bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So knowing all that, it makes you wonder, where does Murder Mile fit in? Does it like break the mold, or does it play it safe?
Well, unfortunately, the reviewer found Murder Mile to be pretty predictable.
Oh, no.
Yeah, relying heavily on those same tropes we just talked about.
Right.
They even said it lacks the depth to really challenge those patterns.
Oh, bummer.
I was hoping for something a little more groundbreaking.
I know. It is disappointing. But it's a good reminder that these tropes, they're really deeply ingrained in how we tell stories.
True.
Yeah.
So what does that mean for Murder Mile specifically? Like, what are some of the things that make it so predictable?
Well, the reviewer mentions that the story hits a lot of familiar beats. Dead body in a park media frenzy. A suspect with connections to the police chief. All the usual struggles of a detective's personal life.
Right, the classic setup.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But there is one detail that stood out to me.
Okay, what is it?
The reviewer mentions that the female detective uncovers a lead and follows it, even though everyone else tells her not to.
Ooh, interesting. And
surprise, surprise, she ends up being right.
of course, gotta love that. It's like the classic trust your gut moment.
Exactly.
So even within this, like, generic story, the author couldn't resist giving her that moment of triumph, letting her outsmart the men around her.
It's a good point. What do you think that says about the author's intent? It makes me wonder if maybe Murder Mile is more subversive than the reviewer initially gave it credit for. Like maybe there's more depth to this character than meets the eye.
That's definitely a possibility worth exploring. It's like this push and pull between those familiar tropes and wanting to show a female character's strength and intuition.
Right. I'm definitely curious to see how this all plays out in Murder Mile. What other clues did the reviewer leave us about the plot?
Okay, so they mentioned one major plot point. The murderer confesses.
Really? They just come clean at the end. That seems kind of anticlimactic after all this buildup.
I know, right? It does make you wonder, though, why are we so drawn to confessions in crime fiction? Like, why are they often seen as the ultimate resolution?
Good question.
Yeah.
I guess it gives us a sense of closure. like confirmation that justice has been served.
That's true.
But it also kind of lets the detective off the hook. They don't have to work as hard to prove their case if the criminal just admits to everything.
Exactly. It shifts the focus away from the detective's skills and deductions and onto the criminal's sudden change of heart. We might even miss out on seeing the detective use those underconfident but brilliant skills to really crack the case.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So the confession detail definitely adds another layer to our analysis here. I'm adding the role of confessions in crime fiction to my list of things to ponder. But back to Murder Mile. If the murderer just confesses, does our detective even get a chance to shine?
That's a good question. I guess we'll have to keep digging into the source material to see how the reviewer assesses the detective's role in that whole climax.
All right, let's do it. I'm ready for more.
Before we get back to the specifics of Murder Mile,
yeah.
I think it's worth taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture here.
Okay.
Why are we so fascinated by female detectives in the first place?
Ooh, yeah. Good question. Let's broaden the investigation a bit.
Yeah, what I find really interesting is that female detectives often represent a challenge to those traditional power structures.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah. They're disrupting this genre that's historically been so dominated by men.
Right. They're these subtle disruptors.
Exactly.
Just by existing in that space, they're already shaking things up.
Right.
And I think that's a big part of their appeal. We're drawn to characters who are fighting against the odds, proving themselves in a world that doesn't always take them seriously.
Exactly. It's like they're giving a voice to those who have been traditionally silenced or marginalized.
Ooh, that's good. Yeah.
And I think that's why it's so important to have that diverse representation in crime fiction.
For sure.
It lets us see the world through all these different lenses, understand the complexities of power and justice from multiple perspectives.
It makes you think about all the different ways female detectives have been portrayed over time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking of some of my favorites from books and movies. They're all so different, but they share this common thread of resilience, this determination to uncover the truth no matter what.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that unwavering pursuit of justice that makes them so compelling.
Okay, I'm ready to get back to Murder Mile. See how our detective measures up to these iconic figures. Does she manage to break free from those tropes we talked about? Or does she fall back on those familiar patterns?
So the reviewer mentions that the detective in Murder Mile, she ultimately uses those societal expectations to her advantage.
Okay, how so?
Well, she kind of plays into that perception that she's not a threat.
Yeah.
Which allows her to gather information and make connections that others might miss.
So it's like she's weaponizing those underconfident but brilliant qualities.
Precisely.
Being underestimated into a strength.
Exactly. It's a classic tactic for detectives who are operating outside those traditional power structures.
Right.
They have to be resourceful, adaptable, and willing to use whatever tools they have at their disposal.
This is making me rethink Murder Mile.
Yeah.
Maybe it is more subversive than we initially thought. Maybe there's more to her than we realize.
Yeah, you might be onto something. The reviewer does acknowledge that the detective eventually confronts the main villain. And in that moment, the antagonist totally underestimates her, which leads to their downfall.
Oh, so good. It's like their arrogance is their own undoing. They fail to see her true strength because they're blinded by their own prejudices.
It's a very satisfying trope.
Even if it is a bit predictable.
It is. But in that sense, Murder Mile does tap into that satisfying trope of the underestimated woman who triumphs over her doubters.
It sounds like the author is walking this tightrope.
Yeah.
Between leaning on those familiar tropes and then finding ways to subvert them.
Yeah.
There's some interesting nuances at play.
Definitely.
Especially in how she navigates her role within the investigation.
I agree. The reviewer might have been too quick to dismiss Murder Mile as just another generic cop story.
Okay.
Maybe there's more to unpack, more to appreciate in how the author portrays her journey and her ultimate victory.
It's interesting how we as readers or viewers, we bring our own expectations to these stories.
Yeah.
We're looking for certain things, certain tropes, certain types of characters. And if a story deviates too much from those expectations, we might dismiss it as generic or unoriginal.
That's a really good point. We all have our own biases.
Oh, for sure.
Our own ideas of what makes a good detective story. And those biases can definitely color how we see a particular book or movie.
Oh, absolutely. I know I'm guilty of that sometimes.
Yeah.
I catch myself thinking, oh, I've seen this before, or
Yeah.
this character feels too familiar.
Yeah.
But maybe that's a sign that I need to be more open to different possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
Challenge my own assumptions about what a story can be.
I think that's a fantastic takeaway. It's all about being aware of those biases and being willing to step outside our comfort zones a little bit.
Yeah.
Who knows what hidden gems we might find?
I love that. So even if Murder Mile might not be breaking the mold completely, it's still got us thinking critically about these tropes and our own expectations.
For sure.
What other interesting details did the reviewer point out?
Okay, so they highlighted how the detective relies on her network of contacts, particularly those within the LGBTQ plus community,
Okay.
to gather information.
That's an interesting detail. It suggests that she's not only resourceful, but also empathetic.
Yeah.
Connected to communities that are often overlooked by law enforcement.
Exactly. And it highlights the importance of diverse perspectives within a police force.
Right.
If everyone comes from the same background, the same worldview, they're likely to miss crucial information or misinterpret key clues.
Absolutely. Diversity is key for effective policing, for building trust within communities, and ensuring that justice is served fairly.
Couldn't agree more.
It's great to see that reflected even subtly in a work of fiction.
Yeah. Now, there's another detail the reviewer mentioned that I found a bit jarring.
Oh.
Apparently, the detective has this outburst. She yells at her mother and sister.
Oh, wow.
It seems really out of character for someone who's otherwise portrayed as very calm and collected.
That is strange. Do you think the author's trying to show a different side to her? Like, make her feel more human and relatable?
It's possible. The reviewer suggests that this outburst is kind of her way of releasing all that tension and frustration,
Right.
that she's carrying because of her job.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
She's constantly surrounded by danger and violence. It's got to take a toll.
Exactly.
It makes you think about the emotional burden that comes with a job like that.
Yeah.
Like, do detectives have healthy outlets for processing all those heavy emotions?
Right.
Or do they end up lashing out at the people they love?
That's a really important question. I think the mental health of first responders is often overlooked.
Yeah.
And we need to do more to support those who are putting their lives on the line every day.
Yeah. It's a heavy topic, but it's something we need to be talking about more.
Absolutely. And maybe stories like Murder Mile, even if they're not perfect, can help spark those conversations and raise awareness about the challenges and sacrifices that come with a career in law enforcement.
I agree. It's amazing how a simple book review can send us down so many different paths. We're talking about gender roles, societal expectations, the importance of diversity, and the mental health of first responders. It's like we've uncovered this whole web of interconnected themes, all stemming from this one fictional detective.
That's the beauty of these deep dives.
Yeah.
We start with one piece of source material, and it just opens up this whole world of possibilities.
Right. A whole universe of questions and insights.
Exactly.
This is why I love doing this. What other fascinating threads are just waiting to be untangled?
Let's see what else this review has in store for us. So the reviewer notes that Murder Mile ultimately reinforces that trope of the female detective succeeding because she is underestimated by her male colleagues and adversaries.
So does that mean the book is failing to challenge those gender stereotypes?
That's a valid critique. It suggests that the book, despite some potentially subversive elements, falls back on a familiar and possibly problematic narrative.
It's like the author saying, yes, women can be brilliant detectives,
Yeah.
but only if they play into those societal expectations of them. Is it even possible to create truly groundbreaking female characters in a genre that's so steeped in tradition and reliant on those established tropes?
That's the question, isn't it? Maybe it's time for a new wave of crime fiction.
Ooh, I like that.
One that really challenges those conventions, subverts those expectations, and gives us complex female characters who defy easy categorization.
I'm here for it. I want to see female detectives who are messy, ambitious, vulnerable, and powerful all at the same time. I want stories that explore the full range of human experience.
Yes.
Not just the ones that fit neatly into boxes.
I couldn't agree more. I think the future of crime fiction is wide open, and I'm really excited to see what new frontiers we explore.
This deep dive has been amazing.
Yeah.
I feel like I've gained a whole new understanding of how complex these tropes are and how they reflect our views on gender and power, which are always evolving.
Right.
But we still haven't answered the most basic question. Did the reviewer actually like Murder Mile, or was it just a case study for them?
That's where things get a little tricky. So we've talked about the tropes, the societal context. We even touched on some psychological elements. But I'm curious, after all this, did the reviewer actually like Murder Mile? Or was it just a case study for them?
Yeah, that's the big question. Does it get a thumbs up or a thumbs down?
Well, that's where it gets interesting. The reviewer praises the book for having enough story to keep you reading,
Okay.
but criticizes it for being so generic you could skip pages and not miss anything.
Ooh, that's a backhanded compliment if I've ever heard one.
Right, it is. They call out the lack of character motivation, emotional stakes, any real value added to the genre.
So not exactly a must-read then.
It doesn't sound like it. In fact, when asked directly if they recommend Murder Mile, they give a firm no.
Yikes. All right, case closed. But you know what? Even though the book itself might not be a winner, this deep dive has been so insightful. We went way beyond just a simple review.
That's what we do.
We explored those common female detective tropes, how they reflect societal expectations,
Yeah.
and even those subtle ways those expectations can be subverted, even in a generic story.
Exactly.
And now we've got all these new questions to keep thinking about.
Totally.
Like, what are some other ways female characters are portrayed in crime fiction? What comes to mind for you?
Ooh. Well, you have the hard-boiled detective, of course,
Classic.
the witty
Thanks,
amateur
bitch.
sleuth,
Never her.
the intuitive profiler. Each of these portrayals carries its own set of expectations and baggage.
Right. And it's so fascinating to see how those portrayals have evolved over time.
Yeah.
Like, have we seen progress? Are female characters becoming more nuanced and complex? Or are we still stuck in those same old patterns?
I definitely think we're seeing a shift. Authors are playing with those tropes more, subverting them, creating characters who defy easy categorization. It's exciting. It means we're moving beyond those limiting stereotypes and embracing the full spectrum of what it means to be a female detective.
I love that. It makes me want to go on a detective fiction binge.
Yes.
Armed with all this new knowledge, I'm going to be looking at these characters with a whole new perspective.
That's the spirit. There's a whole world of crime fiction out there just waiting to be explored. And who knows, maybe we'll even find some hidden gems that break all the rules.
And redefine what it means to be a female detective.
Exactly.
This deep dive has been a real eye-opener.
It has.
I feel like I have a whole new understanding of these tropes and how they reflect our society's views on gender and power.
It's been a pleasure exploring these themes with you. And remember, this is just the beginning. There's so much more to discover in the world of crime fiction.
So true. Well said.
Keep those detective brains engaged.
All right, everyone, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. We covered so much ground today.
We did.
From the specifics of Murder Mile to those broader questions about female detectives and how they shape how we see justice power representation.
It was a fascinating conversation. I'm always amazed by how much we can learn just by unpacking a single book review.
Me too. And I'm leaving this deep dive with a renewed appreciation for the power of stories. They reflect our deepest fears, our greatest hopes, and our, evolving understanding of ourselves in the world.
Beautifully said.
Yeah.
So until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those detective brains sharp.
And remember, everyone, happy sleuthin'!